Good morning. This is January 16th. My name is Douglas Griffin. This is my Sunday school class. I'm teaching on the book of Genesis. I remember because on Sundays, for Sunday school, I'm teaching on Genesis. On Wednesday, we're going through the book of John. And also at 11 o'clock, 2 hours from now, I'll be going through the book of Joshua. We're in the book of Joshua because our service will be online until next Sunday. So welcome. We are, like I said, in the book of Genesis. What do I want to review? Well, as we know, God made a promise to Abraham that his descendants would inherit the land of Canaan. And so Abraham gave birth to, actually it was his wife, Abraham, Isaac. Isaac gave birth to Jacob. Jacob had 12 sons, but Jacob favored his son Joseph so much, that, and spoiled him so much that his brothers hated him. It's kind of Jacob's fault. It's kind of not the brothers' fault, but what they did was their fault. I mean, people can provoke you, but you don't have to act on it. So they sell Joseph off to slavery and got rid of that problem. They sell him off to slavery in Egypt. Meanwhile, Joseph goes through a series of interesting situations in Egypt and rises to power there. His brothers think that he's dead. There's a famine in the land, and his brothers have to show up to beg for food. And now they're facing Joseph, the brother that they got rid of, but they don't realize it's Joseph at first, right? So he tricks them, and then he finds out, oh, all of this happened, this whole selling me away to slavery and the time I spent in prison, all that. God allowed all of this to happen because he had a plan that during this famine, I'd be able to rescue you because the famine was severe. And Joseph's family, his 12 brothers, they lived off of the land. Well, I guess everybody did, whether you were a farmer or were you a herdsman, but with no crops growing, with no grass growing because there was a severe drought. His flocks were going to die. The brothers were going to die. They weren't able to grow any food. So Joseph said, oh, that God sent me ahead of you so that I could save you. So he says, you know what? The drought's going to be, there's 5 more years of drought, 5 more years of famine. You need to come down here. Let me take care of you while you're here in Egypt during this horrible famine. And he moves his father and his brothers down to Egypt because that's why I'm here. Duh. So in Genesis chapter 47, verse 11, it says, and Joseph situated his father and his brothers and gave them possession in the land in Egypt, in the best of the land, in the land of Ramesses. The other name of it is Goshen, as Pharaoh had commanded. So Joseph had arranged for his brothers to take this pasture land that was not directly in Egypt proper, but that was right northeast of Egypt, this land called Goshen, and they could bring all their livestock there because they're herdsmen. Now the Egyptians are the opposite of that. They are all farmers, and so they don't like herdsmen. They don't, because you're going to bring your cattle and your sheep down here. They're going to trample all of our crops and eat up all of our stuff. We grow food, and the friction between farmers and herdsmen has just gone on forever. So Joseph says, "At the perfect land, you live in Goshen. It's the best land. That's perfect." Again, this is Joseph's plan. There's nowhere in these scriptures where we see Joseph ever consulting with God. He does recognize God's work. He does look at it and go, oh, now I recognize God's work. But nowhere is recorded that Joseph went away and prayed, sat before an altar. Doesn't mean that he didn't, but it doesn't mean that he did, because it's just not recorded anywhere. So this is Joseph's plan. You guys will live in Goshen. And so in year 3 So his brothers came down in year 2, realized it was Joseph, and Joseph in year 3 moved his family down and put them in Goshen. In Genesis chapter 47, verse 13, and the reason I'm going over this in this way is because I believe that Joseph's decisions, his plan that he came up with, is part of the reason that the tables turned on his brothers and that they became slaves eventually in Egypt. People think, oh, well, God had to have them become slaves in Egypt so that he could grow them. And like, well, God can grow them anywhere. God didn't. So how did they end up slaves in Egypt for 40? Well, that's what we're going to find out. How did they end up being slaves in Egypt for a couple hundred years? So Genesis chapter 47:13 it says, now there was no bread in all the land. So after in year 2, his brothers showed up. Year 3, he moved his whole family down. Now, it says, there was no bread in all the land, for the famine was very severe, so that the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan languished because of the famine. Nothing, no bread. You're not able to grow any bread. Nothing's growing. It's a severe drought. So you have nothing to eat. I want to go over what Joseph did initially, because Pharaoh has this dream. There's going to be 7 years of plenty and then 7 years of drought. 7 years of plenty, 7 years of drought. So at the beginning of the 7 years of plenty, Joseph interpreted the Pharaoh's dream and came up with this plan. In Genesis chapter 41, verse 33, it says, let Pharaoh do this, and let him appoint officers over the land to collect 1/5 of the produce of the land of Egypt in the 7 plentiful years. A 20% tax, 1/5. Because it's going to be a bountiful year. They're going to have all this extra that they won't know what to do with. So let him take 1/5 of that, all the extra, and collect it for 7 years. So it's a tax that they're initiating. They're not buying the money, not buying the extra grain and stuff from people. They're just collecting it. This is unusual for Egypt, because Egypt to this point had been a collection of farmers who had moved together. They had a pharaoh kind of to regulate and be a judge in case there's land disputes and all that stuff like that. But it was just a collection of farmers. They didn't pay taxes. This is a thing that Joseph instituted just during the 7 years of plenty. You're going to have so much food, we're going to take 1/5 of it. He says it's for your good. Let them gather all the food of those good years that are coming and store up grain under the authority of Pharaoh, and let them keep food in the city. So we're going to just take all your stuff from the farmland all around. We're going to store it up in the city. He says, then that food shall be a reserve for the land for the 7 years of famine, which shall be in the land of Egypt. And the land may not perish during the famine. So we're just going to tax you all your reserve, all that extra stuff that you have, and it's be reserved. We're going to save it up for you. So we're collecting your stuff to save it up for you. So when the famine comes, I'll be able to feed you. Great plan, Pharaoh says. In Genesis 41, verse 49, it says, Joseph gathered very much grain as the sand of the sea until he stopped counting, for it was immeasurable. So much. Now he is counting, he's making a list, checking it twice, of all, I take this much from this person, and that's what this, and this. So at a certain point, he had so much he couldn't even count it anymore. He's doing this because he says people are going to, during the 7 years of famine that are coming up, people are going to come. I need to know how much is there so I can dole it out to people. I can't give it all away the first year. So let me count how much is there, and then I'll kind of decide how much I can give out each year. But at a certain point, he couldn't even count it. It was so much. Joseph's plan. So the food is there for him to give away. But he doesn't give it away. He makes them pay for it. In Genesis chapter 47, verse 14, it says, Joseph gathered up all the money that was found in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan for the grain which they bought. So he's making them pay for it, even though he took it from them and should just be giving it back to them. He's making people pay. Okay, that's fine. We'll pay for it. It says, and Joseph brought the money into Pharaoh's house. So this is in year 4. So in year 3, his family moved down there. In year 4, he has now taken all their money, and literally all their money. People were out of money. They've been paying for 4 years, and now people are out of money. Verse 15 says, so when the money failed in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan, all the Egyptians came to Joseph and said, give us bread. For why should we die in your presence? For the money has failed. You've been collecting our money for 4 years. We've been buying back all this grain that we gave you. And now we are out of money in year 4. So Joseph said in verse 16, give your livestock, and I will give you bread for your livestock if the money is gone. So I've collected all your money and given you bread and charged you this. Not only in Egypt, in the land, people were coming from, Canaanites were coming down, and he was making them pay. And the Egyptian paid. Everybody had to pay. So Pharaoh's getting rich. Joseph's not getting rich. Joseph's not, ooh, I'm making money. He's giving all this money to Pharaoh. So, hey, I'll take your livestock. Now, for livestock, they have horses, which the Hyksos people bought. Now, the Hyksos, just to remind you, the Hyksos were people who had moved out. They were from the Syria area. So you've got Egypt, right? Above Egypt is Israel. Above Israel is Syria, Turkey, that area. Uh, these people came down and they moved into Egypt, and they slowly grew like 100 years before Joseph ever got there. They're growing, growing, growing. The Hyksos people who moved to the point where they eventually took over Egypt. So this Pharaoh who's reigning in Egypt, Hyksos, in case you want to look it up, is not Egyptian. That's one reason why he likes Joseph and his family so much. He doesn't have a problem with them at all because he's not really Egyptian. He's not horrified at people who are herdsmen. He's not a farmer. He's a nomad just like them. And so he's getting rich from all of Joseph's great policies. Just give us your livestock. So they got horses now, and the Hyksos people introduced horses. They didn't have horses. Mules. They also have sheep, which they don't kill, and cattle, oxen that they use, to tread out the fields, and but they're like pets or domestic animals. So there's some countries that do not kill cows. They worship them. They believe they're holy, and so you can be starving, but you're not going to kill that cow. Now there's some countries, I understand, that maybe like cats and dogs. They think, well, that's food. We'd be horrified in America. We're like, no, how can you? Oh, you don't kill cats and dogs. Those are pets. Well, that's how they feel about cows and sheep. You don't kill cows and sheep. Those are pets. Um, so, uh, so they had livestock, but not that they were using it to eat. The Hyksos people, they're like, yeah, we'll take your livestock. So this is Joseph's plan. Give your livestock, and I will give you bread for your livestock. The money's gone. So they brought their livestock to Joseph, and Joseph gave them bread in exchange for the horses, the flocks, the cattle of the herds, and for the donkeys. That was Genesis 47, 17. So thus he fed them with bread in exchange for all their livestock that year. So that's year 5. In year 4, he took all their money in exchange for bread. Year 5, I'm taking all your livestock in exchange for the grain that you gave me. So they have no money, and now they have no livestock. Here's what's interesting about the livestock. Joseph kind of had this plan in the back of his head. In Genesis chapter 46, when his family first moved down, before he introduced his family to Pharaoh, he said, Genesis 46:33 says, so it shall be when Pharaoh calls you and says, what is your occupation? That you say, your servant's occupation has been with livestock from our youth, even till now. Like, we take care of livestock. That's what we do. Both we and also our fathers. He says that you may dwell in the land of Goshen, because this way I can send you to Goshen. So Joseph is prompting his brothers, his father, to, here's what you say when Pharaoh asks you, what do you do? Tell him that you take care of livestock, because Goshen, that pasture land, would be perfect for you, able to live there. It's the best land around, and you'll be able to dwell in the land of Goshen. For every shepherd is an abomination to the Egyptians. They hate shepherds. They hate herdsmen. So that's a good place that you'll be live, and you won't bother anybody, because if you live in the middle of Egypt with all your herds and cows and all that stuff, they will be hating you. But if you live up in that line, it's perfect. So he introduces his family, his brothers, father to Pharaoh, and Pharaoh truly asks him what their occupation is. And he says, "In the land of Egypt is before you. Have your father and brothers dwell in the best of the land. Let them dwell in the land of Goshen." Just like Joseph keeps saying over and over, Goshen, Goshen, Goshen. Yeah, that's a great idea. As you know, any competent men among your fathers and brothers, then make them the chief herdsmen over my livestock. So, because the Pharaoh, he had livestock. I mean, so they can herd them. It's perfect. I will hire them. And that's why Joseph said this. Tell them you're a herdsman. Not only will you get that land, but you'll get a job. So they were making money while everybody else was giving up their money. Joseph is feeding his brothers. His brothers are not paying for the grain. Joseph says, "You come here and I'll take care of you." So he's feeding them. They're not spending any money. They, in fact, are making money because Pharaoh has hired them to take care of his livestock. So now Joseph has taken all the livestock in year 5 from all the people, given them to Pharaoh, and who takes care of them? His brothers. So they're like totally occupied. They're like, "Oh, this is great. We're taking care of everybody's livestock here in Goshen." I mean, well, it's Pharaoh's livestock now, but we've got great jobs. So while everybody else is starving and they're out of money and out of livestock now, uh, Joseph's brother, the children of Israel, they're prospering in Egypt. They're having a great time. Genesis chapter 47, verse 18. When that year had ended, year 5, so now we're about to go to year 6, they came to him the next year and said to him, and this is the Egyptians, "We will not hide from my lord that our money is gone. My lord also has our herds of livestock. There's nothing left in the sight of my lord but our bodies and our land." Because it's year 6. They still have to eat. We have nothing left. You have all our money. You have all the livestock. All we have left is our bodies and our lands. Why should we die before your eyes, both we and our land? Buy us and our land for bread, and we and our land will be servants of Pharaoh. The word servant there would be translated slaves, uh, basically, of Pharaoh. "Give us seed that we may live and not die, that the land may not be desolate." So verse 20 of chapter 47, then Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh. So this is in year 6. In year 4, he took all their money. In year 5, he took all their livestock. In year 6, he's taken all their land. Again, Pharaoh, in those days, the king didn't own any land. The people owned all the land, their own land, and they just had a person over them to make decisions. In case there needed to be an army, he would be able to raise up an army. But he didn't own anything. The king, now Pharaoh owns all the land. This is new. So Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh in year 6. For every man of the Egyptians sold his field because the famine was severe upon them, so the land became Pharaoh's. Okay, got your money, your livestock, and now I've got your land. And this is Joseph's doing. He could have given them the grain because he took the grain from them for 7 years. He took 1/5. I mean, it's very fair. Here, you keep 4/5. I'm just taking 1/5. But they had a huge abundance. So even 1/5 of $1 million is a lot. 1/5 of $1 billion is a lot. So he took it from them. He collected it. He could have just given it back. Why is he making them pay for it? They're having to give up. Now they're thinking, this is fantastic. Oh, thank God he did that. And thank God he did do that because otherwise they all would have died. But he's deciding to make them pay for it to the point. So he's actually instituting slavery in Egypt. You see that slavery didn't exist in Egypt. I'm not saying it didn't exist anywhere else. The Pharaoh didn't own the land and owned everybody in Egypt until Joseph introduced that to Egypt. So before Joseph had the children of Israel move down there, they would just lived in part of their land and mind their business and then left. They didn't have slavery. Joseph came up with slavery. Okay, So then Joseph bought all the land. Well, first let's talk about the land. Now he just owns all their land. I haven't talked yet about how he bought them. But so Joseph buys all their land. So now Pharaoh owns all their land. For every man of the Egyptians sold his field because the famine was severe upon them. So the land became Pharaoh. So now one person owns everything. Uh, the reason I know this is a problem is because when God um, finally takes the children of Israel back to Canaan land and gives them that land, he's trying to create, here's a situation, here's how the kingdom of God would work. So here's how you're going to operate. And in Numbers chapter 26, when he's preparing them to go back to Canaan, he says, Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, this is Numbers 26, verse 52, saying, To these the land shall be divided as an inheritance, according to the numbers of names. So there's 12 tribes, and there's a couple 100,000 people, right? Children of Israel who have come out. So he says, we're going to divide it, and it will be given to them as an inheritance. It's their inheritance. No, he doesn't want a single person to own all that land. You each get to individually own your own land. He says, according to the number of names, to a large tribe you shall give a larger inheritance. To a small tribe you shall give a smaller inheritance. Each shall be giving its inheritance according to those who are numbered of them. So you each get to own your own land. In Leviticus chapter 25, and one day we'll talk about the difference between Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, what each book represents. But in Leviticus, when he's giving them the law, he's saying if someone who makes a series of bad decisions, and now they have to sell their land because they can no longer afford the grain or the whatever it is. If you just can no longer afford your land, you got to sell it. Just like Joseph was having them sell their land, right? In Leviticus 25:23, it says, the land shall not be sold permanently, for the land is actually mine. God's saying, I created the earth, so technically the land is mine. You have this rule, and they had this in Egypt. You know, the first people who got there, that's your land. That's why Pharaoh didn't own the land, because he didn't, everybody got there, they showed up, they staked out their land. This is mine. This land is my land, right? God's saying, actually, the land is mine. You don't own any land. So if the land that I'm giving you, if you make a series of bad decisions and now you have to sell your land, he says, the land shall not be sold permanently, for the land is mine. For you are strangers and sojourners with me. I'm allowing you to live there, which is an attitude we're supposed to have just in general. When we have a car, when we have a house, when we have whatever, we have to say, actually, this is God's. It all belongs to God, and he's letting me use it. So, and he's doing that so that we're not selfish sometimes, and somebody, I need a ride, or no, I'm in my car. And I was like, actually, that's my car. I gave you that. Or if somebody, I'm not saying every single time somebody comes up to us and says, hey, I need a ride, I must let you, because that's not it. But we have to understand that it belongs to God, and we consult God. And sometimes we'll let someone stay over or something, or we'll give our money. We'll give it to, because God says, no, go ahead and give that, because it's actually mine. It's not yours, so you don't get to make the final decision. God makes the final decisions and all these things. So we consult God. And sometimes he will say, share. Sometimes he'll say, don't, because he knows that person's situation. He knows it actually won't be good for them for us to share. Okay, but God knows. We don't know that. So God's saying, make sure you understand it's all mine. But here's a general rule. It says, the land won't be sold permanently, for the land is mine. For you are strangers and sojourners with me. And in all the land of your possession, you shall grant redemption of the land. So it can only, and it will go on to say, it can only be sold for 6 years. And the 7 year, the people get their land back. Because God's not interested in anyone permanently being in debt. So if something happens and you have to sell your land, okay, and you'll work somebody else's land, but then you get your land back so that you can start over again. So Joseph was not doing that. Joseph was buying these people's land for Pharaoh, and it now permanently belonged to Pharaoh. These people never again owned their land. Pharaoh owned everything. And when God set up his kingdom, he's saying, nope, we don't do that. So I know that God did not inspire Joseph to permanently have people sell their land. Because when he set up his own kingdom, he didn't do that. So God doesn't inspire you to do something and then tell somebody to do the opposite later. So this is Joseph's plan. He's thinking, well, I'm here. God has me here. Oh, we'll take all their money, we'll take all their livestock, and now we're going to take all their land. So in Genesis chapter 47, verse 21, and he says, as for the people, so in year 6, he took all their land. This is now year 7. He moved them into the cities. The word moved them is a nice word. It literally means he enslaved them in the cities. Well, here's the deal. There's a word, I forget what the word is, but the difference between moved them and enslaved them is just one letter. It's if it's an R, then he moved them. If it's a D, he enslaved them. And the D has a little thing underneath it in the Hebrew language. It's hard to tell vowels from consonants, and you can tell because of I forget what the little thing is underneath the word.
Vowel points.
Vowel points and things, right? And I remember my friend Jeff Osser, when we were 18 and 17, was trying to teach me Hebrew, and because he was having to learn it for his bar mitzvah and all that stuff, and it's difficult. So you can confuse an R and a D. And so when they were copying this over, some people believed that they meant to make it a D, but they left a little thing off. So he possibly moved them or possibly enslaved them. Now, they considered themselves slaves. They said, oh, we're your slaves. So I think that he enslaved them in the cities, from one end of the borders of Egypt to the other end. And Genesis chapter 47:22 says, only the land of the priests he did not buy, for the priests had rations allotted to them by Pharaoh. So the priests still had to do their job. So you get to live there on your land, and you still get to, and these weren't priests like our priests. They were worshiping this Ra and these different gods, but you still get to do your thing. I'm not gonna own you and your land. And they ate their rations, which Pharaoh gave them. So he gave them food. The priests didn't have to buy back their food. The people had to buy back the food that they had given. We gave you this food for 7 years, and now we're having to buy it back. But the priests didn't, and neither did the children of Israel, because Joseph was funneling food to them, and Pharaoh was paying them. So Pharaoh gave them, therefore they did not sell their lands. Genesis chapter 47, verse 23. Then Joseph said to the people, indeed, I have bought you. So this is in year 7. In year 6, he bought their land. In year 7, I'm buying you. So you used to be able to work your land, but now I'm going to move you to the cities, and you'll work for me here. So I now own you, and now I'll feed you, and I'll give you bread, but in exchange for your lives, I now own you. And so I have bought you and your land this day for Pharaoh. Now Joseph's not buying it for himself. Look, there is seed for you, and you shall sow the land. And it shall come to pass in the harvest that you shall give 1/5 to Pharaoh. So you're going to work this land, and you can have the food that you grow. This is what they kind of used to do with sharecroppers. You can, that's the deal. You don't own the land. I own the land, but you get to work the land. You get to keep a portion of and another portion you give to me. Unfortunately, the portion that you do get, my uncles were sharecroppers and grandfathers were sharecroppers. You're going to have to use that to buy food and to buy clothes and to pay rent. And so in the end of the day, you end up with nothing. So it was kind of a slick form of how can we do slavery? Slavery was really working for us really good. So you do get to keep a portion of it, but now you need that portion to buy things and and the land is not yours. It belongs to me. So you get to keep 1/5 of it. You have to give the Pharaoh just automatically right off the top. Now, this whole thing of giving 1/5 did not exist until Joseph got there. He used it in order to help them during the prosperous years. We'll take 1/5 of it. Then he stopped doing it. He stopped doing that fifth thing because now they're in famine, and he just took their money, he took their livestock, he took their land. But now he's reinstituting the fifth. And the Bible says, so here's seed for you, and you shall sow the land, and it shall come to pass in the harvest that you shall give one fifth to Pharaoh. Four fifths shall be your own as seed for the field and for your food, and for those of your household, and as food for your little ones. So you get to keep four fifths of it. But one fifth, it's gonna say permanently give, because later on it says that he made it the law of the land of Egypt to this day. To this day. So he's just, when Genesis is being written, it's a couple hundred years later, and so Moses is saying 200 years later, that's still now the law that they give one fifth to Pharaoh. So Joseph came up with this permanent tax. Good for him. So they said, however, in Genesis chapter 47, 25, they said, "You have saved our lives," because there was no rain. It was a famine. Thank God, even though we have given up you all our livestock, now you own us and our land, at least we're still alive. So you've saved our lives. So they were grateful because he just did it subtly, little by little by little, and did it under the guise of, "Look how wonderful I am to you. So let us find favor in the sight of my Lord, and we will be Pharaoh's servants." And this word is avadim, which is basically slaves. So they consider themselves slaves. But we'll work for Pharaoh for the rest of our lives, and we'll just give him one fifth of our stuff for the rest of our lives. But at least we keep four fifths, so we're good. We don't own the land anymore. We don't own the livestock. We don't own anything, but we get four fifths of the produce that's grown, and Pharaoh keeps a fifth. So we think like this is a great deal. How does God feel about that? In Deuteronomy chapter 15, verse 12, it says, "If your brother, a Hebrew man or a Hebrew woman, is sold to you and serves you 6 years, then in the seventh year you shall let him go free from you." Now, this is not somebody who's been captured. The Jewish idea of slavery were people who got in debt, just like these Egyptians were in debt. So I have no more money. I will now sell myself to you in order to pay off my debt. And he says, but if your brother, a Hebrew man or a Hebrew woman, is sold to you and serves you 6 years, in the 7th year, you have to let them go free. So you can't, and your debt's wiped away. It says, "And when you send him away free from you, you shall not let him go away empty-handed. You shall supply him liberally from your flock, from your threshing floor, and from your winepress." Give them money because they've worked for you now, and you've made all this money. "From what the Lord your God has blessed you with, you shall give to him." I will tell you that some of these principles was how they came up with 40 acres and a mule when the slaves were set free. Now they never gave them the 40 acres and a mule, but that was the principle. You've worked for us all for 200 years, slaves, and so now that we're setting you free, we should give you. We can't just send you out there. You have no money, you have no home, you have nothing. You're going to just die. What do you have? So we're going to give you 40 acres somewhere. We'll give you a mule. You can tread out your land. This is the same principle here. Your debt's wiped out. People can only be in debt for 6 years. On the 7th year, you have to let them go free. And same thing with the land. People get their land back because God's not interested in permanent debt. The people being permanently, it's crippling. It's crippling and will create a permanent underclass. It creates permanent poverty. And how do you get out of debt? You just never get out of debt. So God's like, nope, that's crazy. Let them start over. Now, if they mess up and end up having to sell themselves again 6 years later, that's on them. But then after 6 years, you have to let them go free, because God keeps giving a second chance, a third chance, a fourth chance. But he doesn't want to create the debt so that you are permanently in debt. Joseph was creating permanent debt. Pharaoh now owns you. And for the rest of your lives, you and your children and your children's children will give money. So you've got the Jews living, you've got the children of Israel living in Goshen, making money off the livestock because they tend Pharaoh's livestock and they already had their own livestock. And Joseph is feeding them. Then you've got the Egyptians who are now slaves, and they're looking at the children of Israel and going, they moved down here and now they're really rich and we're all poor. I wonder if that's going to cause a problem. I wonder if at some point Rodney, Frida, Ada, Suzanne. Hey, you guys. I wonder if at some point they're going to get mad at the children of Israel. I wonder if Joseph's policies, it wasn't just that the Egyptians were evil. We're going to take those children of Israel and perhaps, and I'm reading a lot of rabbis' works and they're saying Joseph didn't do the right thing here. Because you can look at what God told the children of Israel later and to see God did not inspire Joseph to do this way. God's kind of against permanent indebtedness. Okay. So he says, if your brother, a Hebrew man or a woman, is sold to you and serves you for 6 years, and in the 7th year you should let him go free from you. And when you send him away free from you, you shall let him go away empty-handed. You shall supply him liberally from your flock, from your threshing floor, from your winepress, from what the Lord your God has blessed you with, you shall give it to him. And again, that's the attitude. Look how God has blessed me. Our attitude is, look how incredible I am. That poor person, they must be stupid and but I must be incredible. That's why I'm rich. And we pat ourselves in the back, as opposed to, boy, God has really blessed me. And there, but for the grace of God, go I. If it wasn't for God's grace, I could be in that situation. But if our attitude is, I'm just phenomenal, and that's why I'm in this situation, then we're mad at the poor, right? Oh, you must have been, and we don't want to help them sometimes. You got yourself into this, but God says, give from what I blessed you. I'm going to bless you. So if you're blessed, please give me the glory, God says, and don't give yourself the glory, because that's going to backfire on you at some point. So you shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God redeemed you. Therefore, I command you this thing today. So remember how you started out and how I'm the one that blessed you. So you be a blessing to other people. And again, it's just our attitude. God's going to do the same thing. He's going to bless you because if he's decided to bless you, but how are you going to feel about it? How are we going to say, wow, look what I've done. I am so incredible. Are we going to say, wow, look what God has done for me. I'm so grateful. This all belongs to God. If God wants me to give to someone, I'm going to do that. If God wants me to hold on to it for some reason, I'm going to do that. But it's his decision. I'm going to consult God, and it's because it's his. And so what do I do with what God has blessed me with? What do I do with it? That's always our attitude. It should be, right? So back to Genesis chapter 47. In verse 26, it says, Joseph made it a law over the land of Egypt to this day. So that's what I'm saying. This is Joseph's decision. That Pharaoh owns all their land. He owns them. They work for him. They keep 4/5. That's generous. But 1/5 of it they will pay. And again, Genesis was actually written a couple hundred years after this. So Moses is saying, to this day, this is still a law in Egypt. Yea, Joseph, look what he did. He created slavery. And did it backfire on his own kinsmen? So it says that Joseph made a law over the land of Egypt to this day that Pharaoh should have 1/5, except for the land of the priests only, which did not become Pharaoh's. Now, here's how God feels about having someone have total ownership of people. When the children of Israel eventually were freed from Egypt and they went back to Canaan, which they could have gone back to Canaan after the 5 years was up. But once they finally went back to Canaan, they wanted a king. And God had warned them about having a king. He warned them while they were still in the promised land. He said, you're going to want a king because that's just how you are. I'm actually your king. I want you to consult me. God's not hating kings or hating presidents or hating heads of things. He's hating that we start to worship them. He's not, you can never have a king or you can never. It's the fact is there's something in us that wants to serve because God put that in us. There's something in us that wants to worship. God put that in us. But he put it in us so that we'd worship him. But the problem having someone over us is sometimes we worship that person. And then if they say something crazy, we follow them. If they do, hey, I think you should do this, we follow them there, and God's saying that's the problem. You no longer listen to me. And so I don't hate kings, I don't hate presidents. Here's the problem, though, when you have them. In 1 Samuel chapter 8, when the people said, we want a king, starting in verse 10, so Samuel told all the words of the Lord to the people who asked him for a king. And he said, this will be the behavior of the king who will reign over you. He will take your sons and appoint them for his own chariots to be his horsemen, and some will run before his chariots. He will appoint captains over his thousands and captains over his fifties, and will set some to plow his ground and reap his harvest, and some to take his weapons of war and equipment for his chariots. He will take your daughters to be perfumers, cooks, and bakers. He will take the best of your fields, your vineyards, and your olive groves and give them to his servants. He will take a tenth of your grain. Of course, Joseph established he's going to take a fifth of your grain, even more. He'll take a tenth of your grain and your vintage and give it to his officers and his servants. And he will take your male servants, your female servants, your finest young men, and your donkeys and put them to his work. He will take a tenth of your sheep, and you will be his servants. And you will cry out in that day because of your king, whom you have chosen for yourselves, and the Lord will not hear you that day. Nonetheless, so he's saying, and you're going to complain. So there are times that we complain to the Lord. You're going to cry out and say, "Oh no, Lord, save us!" And God won't hear you. I mean, not he hears you, but he's not going to answer you because he already warned you. Don't touch that fire; it's going to burn. And you think, no, but it's pretty. I'm going to do it anyway. And you stick your hand, oh, look at my hand. Ah, make it go away. I can't make it go. It's going to hurt for a long time because I told you not to do that. So I can't just snap my finger and the pain is going to go away. I warned you. And God, you're going to cry to, oh no, this king is exploiting us and he's putting us over. And God says, but I won't, because I'm telling you now, don't do it. So sometimes why aren't our prayers answered? It's not because we need to plead in the courts of the Lord. It's not because, or these other things that people tell us. Sometimes the Bible says clearly, you don't get what you ask for because you ask amiss. You're not listening to me. You haven't abided in me. And words abiding, you're doing your own thing and you've gotten yourself into trouble. And even though I warned you, so sometimes I have to let you suffer the consequences. That's the only way to teach you for next time, that when I say don't do that, now you'll listen. When I say don't run out the street, you'll think, last time mommy said or daddy said don't stick my hand in the fire, I didn't listen. That didn't work out well. So now that mommy's saying don't drink and drive, or don't, maybe I'll listen. So if there aren't consequences when we disobey, then we don't learn to obey. That's just how we are. Something's wrong with us. That's why they have to put up signs saying it's just drive 10 miles an hour in the school zone or we'll take you to jail. Because if they don't do that, then people will drive 100 miles an hour in school zone because something's wrong with us, right? So God's saying, nope, I'm going to give you the consequences. So he says, you will cry out on that day because of your king whom you have chosen for yourselves, and the Lord will not hear you on that day. And then he waited for the people to go, you're right. But the next verse says, nevertheless, the people refused to obey the voice of Samuel. They said, no, but we will have a king over us. So, okay, let me give you Saul. See what happens. So the idea that some king is owning all the land and owning you, God's not liking that there's a person who owns everything. But this is what Joseph is instituting. Joseph is instituting this. Pharaoh, now he owns your land, he owns you, he owns everything. You work for him, but you're getting 4/5, and God's saying that's not enough because you will eventually be exploited. So I don't believe God inspired Joseph to do this thing that he doesn't like people to do. Even in 2 Kings in chapter 18, there's a whole succession of kings. Now they started with Saul, then they had David, which God says, okay, I'm going to give you this king because he's from Judah, and he'll be an example for how you to love me. This is the only person who's going to be an example. Then there's a whole succession of kings who just led Israel astray, but they wanted them some kings. Well, in 2 Kings chapter 18, the king of Assyria is trying to entice the people and saying, hey, why don't you come with me and I'll take care of you? And Hezekiah is saying, don't listen to him, don't listen to him. And in 2 Kings chapter 18, verse 31, he says, do not listen to Hezekiah, for thus says the king of Assyria, make peace with me. Now, again, they own their own land. The Israelites own their own land. God had made that a law. You own your own land. Even though they had a king, and the king led them into various wars and led them into idolatry, at least they owned their own land and were their own way. But now this king of Assyria is trying to entice them and saying, let me rule you from afar. He says, make peace with me. Buy a present and come out to me, and every one of you will eat from your own vine, and everyone from his own fig tree, and every one of you will drink from the waters of his own cistern, until I come and take you away to a land like your own, land, a land of grain and new wine, a land of bread and vineyards, a land of olive groves and honey, that you may live and not die. But do not listen to Hezekiah, lest he persuade you, saying, the Lord will deliver us. God's not going to deliver you. I'm your deliverer. And that's the temptation. Some people, they can offer you, you'll have wine press, you'll have all this wonderful stuff, but you're selling your soul into someone who's going to enslave you. And that's the danger of being tempted by money and tempted by certain things, because people are offering so much. But what do you have to give in exchange for that? And Joseph was saying, you get 4/5 of the land. You're going to get 4/5 of your produce. You're just going to get Pharaoh 1/5 forever. It's a he owns your land. He owns you. He puts you to work, and if you want, but still, you get 4/5. And the people are like, yes, this is magnificent. This is Joseph. You are so good to us.
Easy.
See, so in Genesis chapter 45, here's how he explained it to the Israelites. So I'm just contrasting to what's happening with the children of Israel, what's happening to the Egyptians. In Genesis 45, verse 10, it says, you shall dwell in the land of Goshen, and you shall be near to me, you and your children and your children's children, your flocks and your herds, and all that you have. This is how Joseph convinced them to come down to Goshen in the first place from Canaan. You'll be near me. Then I will provide for you, lest you and your household and all that you have come to poverty, for there are still 5 years of famine. So during these 5 years, let me provide for you. Come down here and I'll provide for you. I believe that was God. Yeah, for 5 years of this famine, here's what God is doing. Because the earth is rejecting God just in general, because only Abraham and Isaac, Jacob, and those people, they're the only people who still believed in the true God. Everyone heard about the true God, but they didn't like him because he had too many rules. So they created their own gods, because if you create your own gods, you can manipulate them, right? And that's what we do today. Everybody knows about Moses and Jesus, and no one is you don't find somebody who Jesus, I never heard that name before, but they don't want him because he has too many rules. He wants to be your Lord. He wants to tell you what to do. The money is his, the house is his, and this house is mine. I work for it. I'm gonna do what I want. If I'm gonna cuss somebody out, I'm gonna do it. And so we don't want the world doesn't want this God. I make my own God. Wall Street's my God, or this is my God, or whatever. I mean, Oprah, whoever, and it's not anybody's fault. It's not Oprah's fault. We make people gods. We make places our God. We make them and we worship them, right? And because we don't want the true God, because he has too many rules. So God allowed a famine all over the land. So people had to come to Egypt because they're the only ones who had food. And when the people came from all over the world to Egypt, how come you guys have food? Well, the God of Israel, this man's God, told him that this was coming, and restored, and look how this plan that God gave him. And that was the point of the famine, was word spread about the God of Israel. Word spread about this God that Joseph, wow, this God is mightier than our gods, because our gods that we created, they didn't tell us about this famine. They didn't prepare us. And so God is this whole little 7-year period of famine was just there so that God could evangelize the world and help them understand, right? And 2 years in, Joseph sees his family and says, you come down here, I'm going to take care of for the next 5 years. And God's like, yes, go down there and you okay. But that's the problem. They got down there and Joseph provided for them, and they had money and they had everything going for them so well that they fell in love with it. In Exodus chapter 16, when they had finally gone out, and now God is there, when they're in the wilderness and God is the one leading them around, they don't have it as good as when Joseph was taking care of them. They have to trust God on a daily basis. Oh man, is there going to be manna today? And that trusting God on a daily basis is exhausting. You just wake up and, okay, God, what do you have for me today? And if you don't like him, if you don't trust him, then that can be, if you trust him, if you recognize God's on my side, then you'd love to wake up. Like little children, hi, mommy, what's for breakfast? They love to wake up because what treat are you going to have for me today? If we understand who God is, then we love waking up. But if we don't trust him, and that's why we're reading these scriptures so we can learn to trust him, then it's stressful every day to wake up because you don't know what God's going to do. So after he delivered them from Egypt, and now it's that day-to-day thing. It says, then the whole congregation of the children of Israel complained against Moses and Aaron in the wilderness. Here's why they complained. Because they remembered what happened when they first got to Egypt. It says, and the children of Israel said to them, oh, that we had died by the hand of the Lord in the land of Egypt, when we sat by the pots of meat and when we ate bread to the full. For you had brought us out into the wilderness to kill this whole assembly with hunger. Like, we don't know if we're going to eat tomorrow. Now, they never died of hunger. God was always providing for them, but they wouldn't know until the next day if food was coming. But it always was there. But that's the stress we put ourselves. Is God going to provide for my need tomorrow? Yes. He provided for you yesterday and the day before. Why is you think he's going to stop? God's not going to stop. But we stress ourselves out, right? But they're saying in Egypt, we didn't have to worry about this. Food piled up. There were pots of meat and all this stuff because Joseph was really just providing for us. Why? Because he'd taken all this stuff from all those other people. He'd taken their livestock, he'd taken all their stuff, and he's able to funnel all this stuff to his family. So they're living up good. Now, of course, once Joseph was gone, they became slaves because the children of Israel, Egypt, turned on them because of how good they had it. So why are they still hanging out there in time for them to turn on them? Okay, in Genesis chapter 47, verse 27, it says, so Israel dwelt in the land of Egypt, in the country of Goshen. While all this is happening, while the Egyptians are becoming slaves, they're living it up, and they had possessions there and grew and multiplied exceedingly. So they're multiplying exceedingly. The Egyptians are going poor and being owned by Pharaoh. And Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years. So they're supposed to say they're just 5. Well, they still have an extra 12 years. The famine is over. The famine is done. But they still hung out for another 12 years because why would they leave? They have it so great. They're not paying taxes. They're being paid by Pharaoh. So the length of Jacob's life was 147 years. Now, when the time drew near that Israel must die, he called his son Joseph and said to him, now, if I have found favor in your sight, please put your hand under my thigh and deal kindly too with me. Now, that's that oath thing where you put your hand right under their thigh and you're vowing, I'm touching your thigh, so that's my vow to you. We do a handshake. They did a thigh thing where we saying, please, this is your vow. Remember Abraham did that with his servant. Anyway, that's their custom. Okay, we all have our customs. And deal kindly too with me. Please do not bury me in Egypt. Jacob knew better than to stay in Egypt. Please let me die with my fathers. You shall carry me out of Egypt and bury me in their burial place, right? You're going to take me back to Canaan. And he says, I will do of you as said. Then he said, swear to me. And he swore to him. So Israel bowed himself on the head of the bed. So like, I'm going to die soon. Swear to me that you're going to go back to Canaan. And Joseph says, I swear. This is God speaking through Jacob, who finally at the end of his life had his priorities together. God told me that he'd given me the land of Canaan. He told Abraham, he told Isaac, he told Jacob, and me. And though it hasn't happened yet, I believe his promises. So bury me back there in the land of God's promise. That's what we call the promised land. Bury me there. You swear that you'll take me there. And finally, at the end of Jacob's life, he finally I need to believe God's promises, whether I see them happen instantly or not. God doesn't fail. His word does not fail. He's going to accomplish what he said it would do. And you swear to take me back there? Yes, I swear. And so they've got their way home. They've got their way back. God has provided for the family. They've grown. They've multiplied just like God told Jacob, I'm going to take you down there. You're gonna multiply. And they have all those 70 kids had kids while they were there for 17 years. And now there's 700 of them or 7,000, they're just growing. And now they're ready to go back. So we'll see next week what happened. But anyway, I am saying that Joseph was kind of the instrument for his own and his family's downfall. And sometimes we can make things too good and we're not doing what not that God doesn't want good for us, but we've come up with a plan for good. God has a plan for our good. And sometimes we have a plan for our good. And it looks great. And it's actually going to be, we're sabotaging ourselves without realizing it because we're not listening to God. God's way sometimes may take a little longer. It may be a more circuitous route, but it's steady. When we get to where God wants us to be, and because we've taken his path, we have a foundation that can't be shaken. When we get there our way, it can all collapse. That's why he says you're like either building your house on sand, sinking, or you're building it on the rock. The rock's going to be solid. If you're following and doing it God's way, then what he builds will not fail. If we're doing it our way, as soon as the rains come, as soon as our house can collapse because it's not building anything solid. So we have to make sure we're following God's plan, even if it doesn't seem as good or seem as fast. Trust me, in the end, we go, oh, this is why God had me do it this way. Oh, this is why God had me do this, and this is so solid now. This cannot be shaken. And this other stuff looked pretty. It looked from the outside, oh, isn't that incredible? But it fell apart. But this thing that God built, it's not going anywhere. It will last. Okay, so thanks for listening in. In an hour at 11 o'clock, I'll be going through the book of Joshua for Good Shepherd members. Obviously, anyone can listen in on my page or on the Good Shepherd MBCLA page at 11 o'clock. All right, thanks so much. And others of you, I'll see you on Wednesday where we're going through the book of John.